So, hey, before we dive into today's episode, I want to send you a little invitation to join me for a free class with me. I am running a workshop called Ease, Somatic Exercise for a Weary Body, on Tuesday, the 3rd of October, 2023 at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. There will be a recording if you can't join me live, but I would love to see you there if you are interested in learning how somatic exercise and self-kindness can help you to experience less tension, more ease, and feel more at home in your body. You can find the details to join me in the show notes or head to ericawebb.com.au/free-workshop. So, hey there, everyone, and welcome to this episode of SelfKind with me, Erica Webb. And today, my very special guest, I am joined by Steph Gros, and I am really, really excited about where this conversation is going to go. I was thinking before we started this conversation that I actually don't remember how Steph and I became connected, but we've been in each other's ecosystem for a while now, quite a few years, I think. And Steph has got just a lot of amazing things, I think, to share with us through the lens of her own experience of being a human, dealing with all the human stuff that we all deal with. And I'm excited to introduce her. So welcome, Steph.
Oh, thank you so much, Erica. I was the same. I was trying to backtrack and go, how did we connect? And yeah, just some way through the beautiful world that is social media. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the beautiful side of social
it.
media. I actually wondered if it was through Lisa Peterson, maybe Donna Farhi, Lisa Peterson, maybe that world.
Maybe those shared teachers, wonderful humans that they are. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, Steph, I would love to pass it over to you just to introduce yourself a little bit to us. It doesn't have to be, huge long bio, but it can be just anything that we should know before we dive into a bit of a chat.
It's always such a huge question, isn't it? Like, how do you distill yourself down into who am I? And I think it's a question that most mornings when I wake up and arrive in my ritual space, it is that question of who am I today? Where am I today? Yes. And so it can be quite hard to kind of distill it into who am I? I am Steph. My name is Steph, and I live in Nelson, New Zealand. I'm a mother to three incredible little humans and a wonderful husband. And I'm in a space of, I wouldn't even say writing a new chapter. I feel like I have closed the book to the previous 4 decades of my life, and I'm beginning to write a whole new book. I have a shared interest with Erica with somatics and yoga, and had trained as a yoga teacher and worked as a personal trainer. Always been interested in the body, the story that the body has to tell us. And I, a year ago, let it all go and have just, I don't know, it sounds so cliche to say finding myself, but kind of just peeling back all the illusions, all the stories, and just wiping the slate clean and starting again, and just what do I want to paint my life with? What colors, what textures, who am I?
Yeah.
And it's just been, just over a year now of this just deep surrender into finding who I am. Motherhood can certainly change our relationship to self and who we are. And, my children, I've got a 12-year-old and 10-year-old twin. So certainly, they're going through different seasons and different ways of becoming themselves. And it's that huge kind of shift in that, mother and child relationship in terms of, what they need from me. And I don't know how else to kind of distill it.
I love that. I actually think it's
beyond that.
I think it's such a beautiful introduction to our conversation, actually, because as you can probably see, I'm writing some notes as you're talking. This idea of who am I today? This is something that I've been chewing over a lot recently as well. And we're at similar stages in our lives. I think we're similar age. My kids are very similar ages as well to yours. And I love this notion of not even, like you said, not writing a new chapter. I've closed the book and I'm starting again. And this notion of like, who am I? I've been really fascinated by this in recent times because I don't feel like who I used to be. I don't know that I know who I am on a lot of levels. And that is simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating.
Mm.
I actually said to my husband the other day, like, am I different? Because I feel like I'm becoming a bit of a different person. And even my interests and things have shifted and changed in ways that I never expected. And it's an uncomfortable place to reside, I think, when it's like this question every morning of like, well, who am I and who am I going to choose to be, you know?
Mm.
So I thought, let's start there. This idea of kind of closing off a book and starting again, which is kind of, I love that you've used that analogy actually, because you also have started writing, and your writing
Yeah.
is beautiful. What was the impetus for shutting that book? Like, why did that need to be shut? Why did you want to shut it? What was the moment, I guess, or it's usually rarely one moment, right? But what was the culmination of things that made you go, you know what, I need to just, like, all of this has to stop and I need something different? What was that for you?
Well, yeah, like I guess to kind of maybe give a theme to what my book of my first 4 decades of my life was
Yeah.
very, people pleasing. I'm a Virgo, like I want to, I guess in my illusion of thinking of like wanting to belong, I was trying to fit in, which is the total opposite of what belonging is.
Mm.
And yeah, I just didn't have that real strong sense of this is me. And to be able to, really embody that unapologetically. And I think the catalyst was, I mean, obviously the last few years have just been quite the ride, with COVID and, globally, there's been so much that we have moved through that we just don't have experience of in, I don't know how many, like years, hundreds of years. I got COVID last year. And, like I had my shelf stocked with all the, medicines that I thought I would need. And, it didn't hit me physically. It was more mentally. Like I just spiraled into a really dark place. And I just had this intuition, just this nudge that just said, just hit pause. And so, I had clients that I was seeing in my home space, much the same as you, like for yoga and personal training and coaching. And I emailed them, and it wasn't even I'm just going to take a couple of weeks, pause and a bit of a breather. It was, I'm just pausing all offerings for the rest of the year. And this was in August. And at the time I was like, why am I doing this? And then, 2 hours later, my husband called. He'd torn his pectoralis major. Obviously needed surgery, rehab. So, all of my attention and focus had to be into obviously, supporting him and just, carrying that full load of family life while he recovered. And that just sort of, I was on the cusp of turning 40, and my mantra for this decade was my fuck it, fuck yes 40s, it just switched into this like vibe of like,
It is
I'm
a bit
done.
like a switch, isn't it? It is
really
a switch.
was,
The 40th year, it's like click. Yep.
No, I was just done, with playing small. And I think in my head, I think, oh, I'm going to live to 100. So 50s, like halfway through my life. And then it's like, well, like the average,
the math doesn't work.
Maybe halfway there now, and this life is, we don't know how fleeting it's going to be. And it was just this real shock of going, I'm not living how I want to be living. I'm not even the person that I want to be in this life. And, just really started, I was without a lot of answers. I'm still without a lot of answers. A lot of my days are just these curiosities and there's, kind questions. And, one of them that has really stayed with me is, what is the shape of my absence going to be? Who am I? And with yoga, my practice has changed so much, much less asana these days and more, I often my yoga is my pen, ink moving across paper feels super yogic to me in the mornings. Just this discovering who am I today, just allowing all those like coordinates and, you know, the maps and the memories, you know, and all the names, just allowing that to dissolve and just allowing myself to be in this unknown space.
Yeah. Did you have a sense of the parts of you that you were like, this doesn't fit? You know, like you sort of said you weren't being who you kind of wanted to be. And then simultaneously saying that you maybe still don't have the answers to that, which I totally get. Was there a sense of the parts of you that you were like, oh, this doesn't fit anymore. This doesn't feel authentic to me. This doesn't feel like who I want to be?
I think it is more like knowing what I want to do and then not actually doing it, I think is more. I mean, through the gift of yoga, you know, that lens of welcoming the wholeness of self, particularly, you know, yoga needs it, like being able to hold those dualities. You know, there's not many parts of me that I feel shame for, or that I, you know, like try and like hide away, or like I am a very open person, and I, you know, am learning how to say this is me.
Yeah.
It was more just feeling those nudges of I want to share this, or I want to do this. I'm feeling called to do this. And like I had this realization a little while ago, you know, cancel culture is this like big movement. It's this thing in the century and or in this recent times. And I was like, I've got cancel culture of self.
Yes.
Like I keep canceling myself out before I even have a chance for anyone else to. And so I think it's been just a year of like, it felt like just that pause, just like clearing everything and just realigning every morning, having conversation with self. Who am I? Where am I? What is my gift to the world today? What is it that I want to share today? And like allowing those questions to be answered from my heart, you know, my mind, I think the mind can easily forget who we are, but the heart remembers. Yeah.
And that sense too of, you know, I wrote down some notes when you were talking and kind of like put people pleasing down there, and this idea of like wanting to belong. And so we're trying to fit in and we're doing all these things. And I definitely have been a people pleaser a lot of my life as well. And I think the transition from being kind of people pleaser by default to who actually am I? What do I want to express through this, you know, body and mind, and what do I want to share, can be a particularly challenging leap, you know, because there is this sense of like, well, who do I have to be to make sure that you're happy, you know, or who do I have to be to ensure that I do belong here, or I do feel like I fit in here. And I know we've had some conversations around this, you know, in other places around this idea of like, how do you kind of just be okay with the fact that sometimes you just aren't for everyone, you know, or that you don't fit in, you know. And I wonder how you've experienced that in terms of, because I know I've had a bit of this recently where it's like people's expectations of who you are and who you've been can make it very hard to like write a new book, because you know, even one of my closest friends the other day, and it was in a very loving way, sort of said, this is the last thing I would have expected you to love, right? Because I'm obsessed with basketball of all things, and she thinks it's really funny, and I do too, like we all laugh about it, but she was like, it's like the last thing that anyone would expect from you. And it struck me, it was totally not a harsh comment at all. It was said in a really loving way, but it occurred to me that in a different form of myself, I would have gone, I can't share this because it's not, I can't be demonstrative in my obsession right now because it goes against what is expected of me or what people know me for. And if they know me and love me for something else, then maybe that love goes away if I'm becoming something different. So I'm curious, you know, just throwing that out as an example, but I'm curious how you found that, you know, going from being kind of like a self-professed people pleaser to like give no fucks 40s. Like, what's the transition there? How have you married those things up?
I feel like I have spent the last year kind of in that cocoon, like a really introspective year. Just it has felt like a resourcing year for me. And I don't know, like the known is just so comfortable and safe and cozy until it's not.
Yes.
And then that's kind of like, where I felt I was with hitting pause with everything. And yeah, it's interesting. Like, I feel like I'm still just, you know, putting those tendrils out there and feeling into, you know, sort of expressing myself that feels true, like in a way that feels true for me. And it was interesting. I think I shared this with you, you know, recently I had someone tell me that I wasn't particularly liked by a group of people, and that I wasn't what they expected, and I didn't fit the mold. I didn't even inquire into what the mold was.
What mold are we referring to?
I don't know. Yeah, I didn't fit it. And that was a powerful moment for me to be able to reflect back and just to see that the person fuck yes 40s would have absolutely crumbled under the weight of those words, spiraled, who knows, for weeks. And in that moment, I was just like, yes,
I did it.
This moment, it just felt like this permission, you know, like I'm no longer going to dilute or diminish myself or squeeze myself into someone else's mold to try and fit in. And for me, it was like this real celebration of going, yeah, I'm not what everyone expects, and I don't fit a mold, and you know, I'm not for everyone, and that's okay. And yeah,
hard thing for a people-pleasing kind of person to say, right? Because it's like, well, I can make myself for everyone. You just give me a chance. I'll find a way.
Exactly. I can bend and contort. I mean, this is why we're yogis, right? Like, no, that's not why I arrived at yoga. But I think it's just been every morning, like I show up in a ritual space to meet who I am, and just to develop that relationship with that part of me that is unshakable, like 100% okay, you know, always okay, always enough, pristine, you know, that part that is within all of us. And, you know, life takes us away from it constantly.
And our mind takes us away from it, right? 100%. It's not mind-based.
No, but to know that pathway back in.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what I've been writing this past year.
Oh, I love that. And I want to dive, I think this is a perfect segue, because you've mentioned the word ritual a few times, and this idea of spending the year resourcing yourself. And I love that. I think that's a beautiful way to term it. I love following along with your ritual. Ritual is not something that I have ever really, unless you count my morning coffee as ritual, which I think I will. I have never really been a ritual kind of person, which is, you know, who's to say? Maybe I will be tomorrow, because we're all just figuring it out, right? But I would love you to talk a little bit about what that ritual has been, both in terms of the specifics of like what you do, because it's quite unique. It was certainly new to me, the ritual that you engage in, and how that has been resourcing, because one of the things that I think is really important, and you can tell me what you think as well, of course, is that the rituals and the disciplines and the habits and the things that we, you know, go after and we develop, there's a really big difference between engaging in ritual or engaging in disciplined kind of actions or, you know, habits because we should. And it, you know, it's kind of like this becomes this kind of like almost superstition in some ways, versus how it resources us and being drawn to it because of the way that it kind of helps us to connect or come back to our center or whatever it might be. And that's what I see in your ritual. And I, you know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I see when I kind of watch from a distance through Instagram stories, is I see someone so committed to a ritual because of the way that it resources you, not because you're trying to, you know, kind of be a certain thing. For a little bit of context for the people listening, the reason I bring this up is because when I was doing my yoga teacher training, we had to sign a contract that said we would meditate for an hour every day. An hour is a really long time.
Yeah.
And still mind meditation, right? So like trying to come to still mind. It was torture on some days, like proper torture on some days. I did not really love that part, but because I'd signed a contract, I was in, right? But that experience certainly taught me a lot. But one of the things that it taught me was that there's a very big difference for showing up for something just because you said you would, and showing up for something because it feels like it resources you. Now, that's not to say I don't like meditation. I love it, but different conversation. So that's kind of the context for your benefit and for everybody else of why I bring that into it, because I do think that they're very different reasons for showing up. And I just see a very authentic drive in the reason that you show up for ritual every day. So I'll pass it over to you to tell us what it is.
Yeah, I was reflecting this morning. My children, like a little sidestep, but every evening when we have dinner, we have this ritual as a family where we each say 3 things that we appreciate about each other. And one of my sons said to me, I really love it in the morning when you come out of your cacao ritual and you give me a hug. And then he was like, how long have you been doing that for now? I was like, wow, it was 295 days. And I was reflecting that I can't recall, other than breathing and just, the basic life functioning things that we do. Like, I can't recall any practice that I have been this devoted to. And yeah, I loved your question around, there are habits, and I haven't signed contracts to do meditation, but I can feel that kind of energy behind it. And I think for me is that when I show up into the space in the morning, I'm not trying to fix anything. Like, this has felt like the healing from all the healing. I have spent years investing in, like, this is broken in me, so I'm gonna, invest my time, money, and energy into this modality and this modality and this modality. And just with this constant thread of trying to fix what I've perceived as being broken in me. Whereas this ritual, I just had this full permission. It's something that brings me joy. A warm cup of cacao in the morning is just so divine. I love, claiming the space in the morning before any other part of life atones me. As you touched on at the beginning, Erica, like, I choose who I want to be today, before I feel like the world has kind of told me who I need to be today. So there's a joy in the ritual. And I think it's just meeting myself in my wholeness as I show up. And, there's seasons to it, and just allowing every season to have its place and to be 100% okay. Like the anger that I show up with in the morning, welcome.
Yeah.
Like the joy, the playfulness, the mischievousness, just that full spectrum of humanness is fully welcome when I sit at that altar and sip my cacao. And I think that is how it has been resourcing for me, is that it's just been this full permission to embody who I am in this moment, and to, not relegate any part of myself to the shadows and shame. And that has been so powerful for me. Instead of, trying to think, right, I'm going to fix this negative thinking and this people pleasing, and coming at it through that lens, I could do it for a week or two, and then I would just spiral into that default pattern again.
Yeah.
So I don't know, somehow meeting the wholeness of me versus fragments of me has just been that catalyst to, maybe this ritual feeling me more resourcing than perhaps other practices that I have tried over the many, many years.
I love that distinction of, and I've written this down twice, actually. That's how much I liked it. Healing from the healing. I think that is such a huge topic. I think I've even recorded a podcast episode about that in the past, this idea of like self-improvement burnout. It's 100% a thing, because when you see yourself as this, as yet, what am I trying to say? Not yet perfect, being who could be fixed, right? Who could be perfect, who could just, if they tried a little harder, finally get it right, and it does ask that view of being human asks us to relegate parts of ourselves, because if you are angry, if you are jealous, if you are judgmental, if you are these things, then maybe you haven't quite got there yet, right? Whereas it's like, I'm very much like you, like, no, bring all of you, please bring all of you, and befriend those parts of you, because they are not wrong. They are not bad. They are not pieces of yourself that you need to shed. They're parts of you that are asking for you to just like pay attention, right? Like say hello, welcome. But it isn't what we're taught. You know, it's such an interesting thread to try to pull on in our fourth decade on the earth, you know, to just be like suddenly like, oh, is this okay? Is this okay? This is okay.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, but I've spent the last 4 decades believing that it wasn't. So, interesting. Cacao, though, tell me more about this. I'm so fascinated by this. In terms of the actual ritual, is it the making of the cacao? Is it the drinking of the cacao? Is it the whole thing? Is there more elements to it that I haven't seen? Or like, talk me through it. I actually really want to know, like, if I was sitting with you to do cacao in the morning, what are we doing?
Yeah, well, it's fluid. And I think that's another thing which has allowed my practice to continue, is to not have these like really strict regimented boundaries of this is how it must be. You know, certainly cacao is the plant medicine that, you know, is sacred and, you know, should be revered. And, you know, for me, it's a ceremony of gratitude, absolute gratitude and celebration for all that is. Yeah, I sing while I shave my cacao. That awakens the wa. So cacao is kakawa, the masculine, feminine, and the wa is the spirit that comes from the blending of the masculine and feminine. So yeah, the singing enlivens that spirit. And I think I was particularly drawn to that because sharing my voice is something that has been really challenging for me. And so, yeah, I mean, just over that, obviously teaching yoga, I had to, you know, share my voice, like to guide these beautiful humans through a yoga class. And today, yeah, you got me on this one, Erica. So yeah, I mean, cacao, there was something about this singing, like it's, yeah, opening up my own voice, whether that voice is shared on paper or through these, you know, the little mosaics on Instagram or, yeah, in person. That's been a huge gift from the cacao. Yeah, and I blend it up, adding, you know, whatever sort of, you know, spices and sweeteners that I just feel called to. It's all very intuitive. And I love that as well. Like, again, that's just felt just cultivating that self-trust. You know, it's not something to get right or wrong. It's, I'm feeling pulled to this today and trusting that. Yeah, and then I go and sit down and I just take a few moments just to land into my body and my being and where I am and who I am today, and just sit with absolute gratitude for all that is arriving, you know, into my altar space, all that is arriving onto the mat. And once I've sipped, I will usually just free write and journal for, you know, 10 to 15 minutes, you know, just this way of writing beyond the known, you know, allowing everything that's known to sort of dissolve through the membrane and just to come into the unknown. And so, yeah, this practice of free writing, perhaps the people don't know, is my pen literally doesn't lift from the paper. It's just a continuous stream of writing. You know, looking at my journals, there'll be times whereas I do not know what I'm writing. I don't know what to write next. What about like, but it's just this continuous stream, just moving beyond this like conditioning of the mind that we, you know, so often live by and with. Yeah. And then I don't know, I am not working at the moment, so I know that my ritual space, I can really linger there some days and really, you know, luxuriate in the space. Other mornings it's, you know, like a 20-minute practice. Some mornings it goes on for 2 hours as the cacao takes me into some somatic movements or yeah, just a long writing session, or it's very fluid. And I think again that helped with, sustainability is the right word here for ritual, but it's helped with that sustainability, that the showing up daily to myself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you brought up the sustainability that is within the flexibility of the, you know, system, for want of a better term. Because I think that's where sometimes we do come really unstuck, is we have this set of rigid rules, and then it's like, oh, I didn't meet the rules today, so I guess it's all out the window. That just sounds like such a beautiful practice. And I'm really struck by the intentional carving out of like time. To me, that, you know, you could replace the cacao with something else. You know, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't really like cacao, whatever, you know, it's actually at the heart of what you're doing is the carving out of time that is for you. And that is a radical act, right? Like, in terms of, you know, the only productivity that is really involved in that is the benefit of, or the gift of seeing and knowing yourself. And that is not a thing that has been particularly, you know, praised in our society. And I very much believe that claiming that time, like I kind of snort laugh, because it's like, it sounds so ridiculous in some ways to be like, well, you got to claim your time. And it's like, but you have to claim and protect the time that is you to meet yourself, because nobody else is going to give that to you. You know, nobody else is going to be like, oh, it looks like you really need some time to yourself. We have to claim it. And I wonder what it's been like for you to claim that over a year. You know, I remember the first time I kind of claimed space, and I was terrified. It felt so foreign to me. It felt so selfish. It felt so risky, to be honest. And now I'm like, this is mine. Like, you can just all just be not here. This is my time. I'm so protective of my alone time, because I know how resourced it makes me. I know how it makes me feel when I don't do those things. So I'm curious to know if there's anything you want to share around like how that experience has been, and for this extended period of time, because that isn't always easy. You know, it isn't always easy to claim that amount of time for ourselves. I've had periods of years too where I've claimed a lot more time than perhaps society would say was reasonable. And so I'm just curious if there's anything you want to share about that, because I think it's really helpful for people to hear that, like, you can claim some time for you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've had periods, I had 3 kids under the age of 2 at one time, so there wasn't a lot of claiming time.
No, there's periods of life that just don't lend themselves.
It's probably not going to happen. I mean, I'm sure even within that, though, there'll be windows of, I need to tap out, I'm going to go for a walk right now, or I'm going to lose it type thing. And I've had periods of time where I would, you know, claim that time in the morning to study or to, you know, practice yoga. But again, it was how I was showing up, the intention I was showing up with. Like the study, it was to somehow become a better, like to change who I was in some way. I wasn't good enough. I need to study this to get there. So in some ways, it felt like a like more of a punishment as opposed to like a resource. And even, you know, some of the mornings that I would claim to practice, you know, yoga asana, it was, I'm not good enough to be teaching. I need to do this every day. It wasn't even I'm doing this because this is just so nourishing for me. And so I think it has literally been that flicker, that switch, like, why am I showing up? And what am I showing up for? And I think, you know, to me, you know, my relationship with yoga has changed, you know, as I mentioned, from a predominantly, you know, asana practice to now, you know, that lens of what is yoga has widened so much. And it now just comes down to, well, what practices are resourcing me to become the kind of person that I want to be, you know, to have the shape of my absence eventually, you know, be something that I am proud of, you know, that my family is proud of as well. And yeah, I guess just sort of speaking to, like, it can, and I've had this, I guess, these questions in my own mind of, oh, well, God, this is a bit self-serving, isn't it? You know, like, you're taking this time out and going, this is mine. And also, like, knowing that taking this time, I show up as a better mother to my children. I show up as a better partner. I show up just as a kinder human. And so there is an element of self-serving, but it also serves the, you know, the wider collective of, you know, my immediate whānau, so my family, and just, the community around me as well. And I think it's just showing up and meeting myself as a whole human and welcoming all of that. And as I said, I'm not trying to fix anything when I take that time in the morning. It's just that time to go, hello, sweetheart, how are you?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. And I think something that you said there too, this sense of the time taken, right, is also a part of kind of accepting all of the pieces of you. We're not very good at accepting that sometimes we just genuinely do need more rest, more pause, more less doing, that doesn't always feel like a comfortable place to land. I have a very complicated relationship with rest, even now, even still. And to me, the pause for you reflects that kind of willingness to see that part of you that's just like, no, like we need to lay down now and do this work, for want of a better term, even though it's not really work. But something you said there around like the study and almost the ways that we can trick ourselves into believing that we're carving out time for ourselves. I deeply resonate with that. I've oh gosh, I was like, oh yes, I did a lot of study when my kids were babies, and yeah, kind of tricked myself into believing that was for my benefit. And yeah, I think you're right. There was an element of punishment in that, because it was like, well, you continue to be productive. Whew, yeah, that's a big chunk of something to chew over. But again, it's like we can look at these things in the rear view mirror and be like, oh, like I can have so much compassion for that person, and who I was. And that's what I hear every time you sort of speak about this. It just, to me, it's just like, it's this ability to meet yourself with compassion, this commitment to meeting yourself with love in whatever that looks like today. And having that as your foundation, even when you don't feel loving necessarily, even when, you do wake up mad or have those feelings that perhaps are, the less shiny ones. So I think it's just such a beautiful, thank you for sharing it. It's just, I think we all will take something big away from this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I think, and it's an ongoing conversation, and I just love having these conversations. Just, who are you? How are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one too. I had a friend who's a very thoughtful friend who messaged me the other day, and she said, big question incoming, how are you? And I was like, oh, I like that you prefaced that, knowing that it wasn't necessarily a simple answer. Because I don't know. Yeah, I wonder, have you found that your answer to that question, when you ask it of yourself, right, in morning ritual, as you kind of check in and you notice, like, how am I? Who am I? All of those things. Has the I don't want to say answer, because I don't know that there's always an answer, like you said. Sometimes it's just more questions, but has it gotten more layered over time? Has it become like a deeper dive over time? Did it take time to peel back just the, like, I'm fine, or I'm angry, or I'm this, or I'm that, as kind of just like a sort of short statement, into something that has more layers and perhaps even more ways of sensing?
Yeah, well, I think like coming into this, already like resourced through, the modality, the approach to yoga that, we both share. I lived a lot of my life living outside of my body, and then I was this insane hypochondriac, like you when my little ones were little.
Yeah.
I studied, at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, because I was such a hypochondriac. I was like, okay, I need to learn about this body. I did, a university paper on anatomy and physiology. I'm like, what is this thing that I'm in? And, trained as a personal trainer, and, I was moving my body. And then yoga was like, oh, I have a body. I am a body.
Oh, interesting. Yes.
And so, yeah, I think it's because of that lens of living more of that inside out. My yoga practice was more inside out. It wasn't, like, this is how this asana looks. It was like, how does my body want to be in this?
Yes.
And so I think I already had a language there when it came to my body and what it was experiencing somatically. For me, I think this year of resourcing was actually literally just saying, bringing my hand back to my own heart and just saying, you matter too. And just showing up to me first and then the world,
yes.
which had been sort of, a long time in reverse to that. I think I've completely lost like your original question with whatever tangent I went on
I'm
there
sure
as well.
I'm sure you answered it. I'm sure you answered it. You made me think of something else. I'm just thinking, yeah, you're so right. Like the structure that so many of us live by is, serve others first and then come back for you if there's time, resources, money left. And it's one thing that I hear over and over and over and over and over and over again in my work. I'll get to it when. As though the it is this structure, is this rule-bound kind of thing, is this answer, right? And I'm sort of, as I think about that dilemma, I guess, that we have as humans of kind of choosing ourselves, even when that feels counter to the culture, counter to what we've been taught, counter to maybe even what feels inherently like right sometimes. I'm struck by the fact that, I've even lost my thought now. I'm like, where was I going with that? that is like a really bold kind of brave thing to do. And we often hear like almost like this reasoning of like, oh, well, but it's still good for other people. If I show up for my practice, then it's good for me, but it's also really good for other people. And this way that we kind of have to rearrange our thinking about things so that it still benefits the people around us, which I think is a beautiful altruistic sort of way of thinking. But at the same time, it's okay to do things just because it feels, resourcing and good for you. But yeah, helping people to see that it's actually okay to switch the order there. And that's so tricky. I don't think I finished my thought properly then because I lost my train, but hopefully that all made sense. But
yeah,
thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah. And I think it's just, as like with anything that we do with life, show up with that kind compassion to self, and there is no getting it right or wrong. I mean, this morning ritual could be your cup of coffee, but it's just sitting with it, with this intention, of just welcoming all of you to the moment, welcoming all that is around you, the space that you're in, where you are sitting, lying, however you're arriving into the morning, but just taking that moment. And it can just be a few breaths just to breathe in that gratitude for being who you are, where you are right now in this moment.
Yeah, I love that. I realized where my thought was going. I was going to just say, thank you for bringing that up around the rules and things as well, because I think when we are, like, if you're someone listening and you're thinking, okay, but I'm still very stuck in this them before me kind of mentality, considering that what Steph's saying around like the rigidity doesn't help you, in sense of the flexibility and recognizing that there is sort of no answer, there is no end point, there is no goalposts that we're trying to meet, I think takes the pressure off to be able to say, like you said, sort of meeting yourself every morning and being like, what today, what now, what here. It takes the focus off of what should I be doing in order to be this person, and kind of just turns the lens around and says like, who am I today and what do they need? It's such a different way to live. I sometimes still feel frustrated at my lack of structure sometimes around my certain parts of my self-care. But whenever I come back to look at it through this lens, I'm like, no, the structure is the thing that actually turns me into often somebody who doesn't recognize themselves, somebody who doesn't really feel connected. And I know that's not true for everybody. I know that there's people who would swear by the other way around, but I really appreciate your sharing around that, because I think this ability to be flexible is so uncomfortable sometimes. So uncomfortable because there's no structure, there's no, or there can be structure around it, as you've demonstrated with the cacao, but it asks for so much more honesty and trust, like you alluded to before. So yes, anyway, I'm rambling. I wanted to just have a quick look at my notes because I did make a few notes of things we were going to kind of maybe touch upon in our chat, but I'm also looking at the time and realizing we may need to do a part 2. So instead of going down another rabbit hole, perhaps I'll throw it over to you and just say, is there anything that we haven't talked about? Is there anything that you think, oh, I hope that I, made this point clear, or there's something I want to leave people to kind of mull over? And yeah, leave it over to you.
Yeah, that's a big question too, isn't it?
It is a big question.
I think, yeah, I mean, my hope from this conversation, I maybe just to your listeners, that we began this with my nervous, anxious energy, just going, let's just have a conversation, and whatever unfolds. Yeah, I think the biggest gift of this past year has just been welcoming my whole self exactly as she is in that moment. Just stop trying to fix what's not broken. Yeah, you are enough. You are okay. You are 100%, pristine and amazing, and it's okay. And, not to say that, we never want to evolve and to change and to grow, but it's allowing that to unfold from within, as opposed to imposing it in on ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And letting that evolution just be a continuous thing, right? I think that's one thing that I love from your story is it's been a year of this pause, and there's still questions, and there will still be questions forever and ever. It's okay to just keep exploring who you are, because I mean, we definitely don't know the depth of it. We definitely don't know the fullness of it, as it keeps shifting and changing and adding pieces and removing some of those illusions, as you said earlier. And I think that's an ongoing process. So thank you for, modeling that for us and sharing that with us so openly. I really appreciate that. For people listening, go over on Instagram and follow Steph, because she shares the most beautiful images and words. She's been doing a lot of pen to paper, and I absolutely love the things that you share. It's really beautiful. I actually want to read one of them. This one was so lovely, and it's only a short one. There's a couple I was like, which one will I choose? But you wrote this about self-doubt. My compass of truth lives in the atlas of my heart, not in the tongues of others' mouths. And I love that. I think that's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
So thank you for your words. Do you want to tell people where they can find you if they want to connect over on Instagram or anywhere else for that matter?
Yeah, I'm mostly hanging out at cacao_conversations on Instagram.
Awesome. I'll link that in the show notes as well, in case anyone wants to just click through. Thank you, Steph. This has been such a joy. I am so grateful that you said yes. So thank you. And I think we'll have to do this again. I think there might be a part 2 coming up sometime in the future. So thank you so much.
I loved it. Thank you so much for holding this space, Erica. Such, a beautiful gift that you are to this world as well. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.